Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media with myself, Salailo Mokwidiri, on this Juma edition of News and Views. Really excited that you took the time to join us. And in a bit, we'll be delving in a very concerning topic. If you look at the numbers and you look at the pictures coming out of the KwaZulu-Natal legislature, then it's one of concern where prominent Indian figures and several lobby groups have cried the lack of Indian representation in the KwaZulu-Natal government legislature. A lot of people saying, Indians make up, the second biggest population group in the KZN after black people. They make up about 1.2 million people. And looking at the picture of the provincial legislature and the representatives thereof, it doesn't really mirror what is the reality on the ground. And in that era and generation where we always scream representation, something seems to be amiss, and we'll be joined a bit to chat about this issue by Jama-ah KZN leader Asghar Khan. Asghar, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Salam Media.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum to your listeners, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all a blessed and Mubarak Jumu'ah. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure's all ours. Let's jump right into it. Representation in the KZN legislature, one of concern, one that a lot of prominent figures and political parties like yourselves have raised, the issue of representation. Not a lot of Indians in the KZN legislature. What do you make of this?
I think, you hit the nail on the head. When you say that there's not a lot of Indian representation, but it's just not about having Indian representation as such. It is important to understand why we call for this, and we're calling it out because Indians or people in general need to be represented at all spheres of government, because when people are represented at government and people on diverse backgrounds, brings about inclusivity within our communities. And this, whether it's a local council or the provincial legislature, or in this case the premier's cabinet, the cabinet of the executive council of the province, needs to be diverse and should reflect the diversity of the people within the community and within the province as a whole. And I think at this stage, the way it stands in KZN, a large group of the population, namely the Indian people, with 9.4% of the population, is not represented on the premier's cabinet or the executive council of the premier, and very underrepresented within the legislature.
And I'm reading an article here where you mentioned the fact that Indian people in the KZN are more or less used as voting fodder. I'm also looking at a statement made by Faisal Solomon where he mentioned they need to move beyond identity politics. And I think with the formation of this quote-unquote GNU, this is what a lot of people have in mind. How do you balance the need for representation with the call for unity and social cohesion, particularly in a province as diverse as the KZN?
When we say that Indian people are being used as voting fodder, we'll stand by it because we've seen for the last 30 years, political parties, the ANC, the Democratic Alliance, have been going to mainly Indian areas, Chatsworth, Phoenix, those type of areas, and winning wards and ensure getting the vote of the community. And you look in the communities as nothing has changed. People are still suffering. There's no opportunities, lack of opportunities for the people of those communities. So when we say that the Indian people are being used as voting fodder, we are saying that there's no return on their investment as such. They are voting for political party A, B, or C and getting no return for their vote. I think when we say social cohesion, and we are not moving in the direction of ethnic politics. I think we must not get confused. We are saying that we need to have equitable representation. There must be fair representation of the people of the community, of the province, in order for those people to be effectively represented. A person from Richards Bay or a person from the far north may not have the lived experience of the person of Chatsworth and Phoenix or the Indian community as such within the province. Therefore, we're saying that the Indian community needs to be represented by its people. We are not saying
Mm,
ethnic politics. We are not saying that no, we are trying to move in this direction or that direction. If we are saying ethnic politics, then it should have been more Indians being represented. And there's pictures
mm,
that are going around of, and it's sad that there's a population group that is far less than the Indians in KZN have two representatives. And I think you have it on your screen at the moment.
yeah.
uh, it's sad to say that we live in a diverse community where 9.4% of the community of the province is Indian, and there's not an Indian in that cabinet. And I'm sure they are very capable representatives from those three parties that are, or four parties that are represented in the cabinet. They are very capable individuals that represent those parties that can serve in the executive council.
Let's speak about the community itself. How have they reacted to this? I mean, when the pictures came out and it was announced that these are going to be, the new administration that's going to be running the province, and then you look at the picture, there's no one that looks like you. I think as a person of color myself, as a black person, whenever I'm met with something like that, it's almost, it makes me angry. It makes me angry that I don't have anyone that looks like me, that understands my lived realities and the needs that I have, and they are there supposedly to represent me. How has the community responded to this?
The community as such, if they don't identify someone within that space, then the community tends to sit back. Unfortunately, we don't have that very activist community anymore. But I think if I put, what happens is it's more for symbolic representation also. If people are represented in high levels of government positions, or if you look at Lenasia, for example, our councillor Imran Musa is there. People tend
Mm,
to resonate with those people that they are familiar with. So if you're not represented there, then what happens is it does not have, or the youth and the youngsters of those communities don't have a role model to look up to. It doesn't. The community also would feel that their contributions towards civic society have not been considered and not been taken and not been valued. So I think it's important that the premier uh, revisits his cabinet appointments and ensure that it represents the people of the province, and not just a select few members of the community.
And just to give historical context, historically, how has the representation of Indians and other minority communities in the KwaZulu-Natal government evolved from the previous administration and to what we're seeing now? How does it compare to the current situation? Is this something that has always been happening, or this is the first time that it has happened that you don't even have one person of Indian heritage that's represented in the KZN legislature?
I think from 1994, there was always this representation of Indians in the provincial legislature and the provincial cabinet, up until Premier Nomsa Dube came on board. There was still representation of the Indian community in MEC Ravi Pillai, and there were Indians in high positions within the legislature. For example, the Scopa chair was Mrs. Govender, and we find that those things, obviously, the legislature is not constituted as yet, so they may well be chairpersons from the Indian community. However, the executive council is bereft of Indians, which is a concerning fact, because the cabinet takes decisions and policy directions for the province. And if the Indians are left out of that, it's unfortunate for the large Indian community in KZN.
This is really interesting for me because whenever Black Africans raise this kind of issues, we are always told that you're pulling the race card. We're living in a non-racial, rainbow nation, South Africa, and we are all the same and we're all South Africans. For you personally, how do you respond to such allegations that? You did say that we're not looking for ethnic politics, but then there should be representation. But how do you respond to those that might say, well, you're pulling the race card again, you're doing exactly what the black people are always doing, because that's the case. We always get that. Well, what's your response? What's your response to that?
It's very important that people are represented by people who live their experiences. Uh, a black person in South Africa, an Indian person in South Africa were persecuted for many, many years. And it's important that those views or those communities' plight is brought to the forefront. I think what diverse government does is also creates a diverse perspective, which leads to better decision making. I think you have people of different backgrounds on the executive council, or people of different backgrounds in any committee as such. Um, it leads to better decision making, and it also eventually leads to better policy outcomes. Indians, uh, in general, have played a part in the liberation of South Africa, and I think that that legacy needs to continue. It's not something that we would really readily give up. Uh, under the guise of saying no, no, we're all South Africans. Yes, we're all South Africans. Yes, we all are sympathetic and empathetic with the plight of all people around us. However, I think it's important that as a community, as a large community within this country, we are represented at all spheres of government.
And has there been any kind of engagements with the political parties that make up the current legislature? Have they responded to your concerns? What has been the communication?
No, we've tried to reach out to some political parties. Unfortunately, those have failed, and none of them have come back to us as Al Jama to listen to our concerns of the Indian people not being represented.
And just finally, what message would you like to send to the Muslim community in the KZN in light of these recent events?
No, firstly, we would like to thank the Muslim community for participating in the elections and for participating and voting. Although we split our votes in many, many ways, which didn't gain the Muslim community representation. However, I think it's important that we keep up the activism and we ensure that going forward towards 2026, that every council out of the 54 councils in KZN has a Muslim representative based on a Muslim ticket going forward and representing each community. I think from grassroots we can build up the representation and ensure that come 2029 that not we won't have this cry of no Indians, no Muslims in the legislature, but we take the stand and ensure from now we work towards 2029 and ensuring that our people are adequately represented. I want to
Mm.
thank you again for the opportunity of being here this morning.
Thank you so much. Pleasure was all ours. That's where we're going to leave it. And I hope me and you will be chatting soon as this issue unfolds. I'm sure it's going to be one that's going to be sparking a lot of debate in the KZN. They have it there, Asghar Khan. He's an Ultramar KZN leader and, making concerns about the GPU, the Government of Provincial Unity out in the KZN, that there was not even a single Indian representative who made part of, the legislature of the seventh administration. So I think, yeah, it's going to be a really, really interesting one. But what really stands out for me is that fact. Eh? How many times have we heard black people, why are you pulling the race card? Huh? Apartheid is over. We new one, South Africa. Eh? How many times? It shows. It shows that representation does matter. Doesn't matter whether you're white, you're black, Indian, colored. When it comes to those that are in power, ultimately, you're going to want someone that looks like you, someone that sounds like you, someone that understands your background and your immediate needs to at least make a part of the decision making body that will ultimately be affecting your lived reality and your lives. Whether it's in the echelons of leadership, provincial level, national level, whether it's in religious organizations, you know, who makes up the governing body of your church, who makes up the governing body of your mosque, who makes up the governing body of your synagogue. Representation, representation, representation. And I think what's happening in the KZN is going to open a lot of people's eyes where they'll now understand that it was never about pulling the race card. When you say, well, where are the black people? Why am I the only black person in the room? Or why am I the only male in the room or the only female in the room? Where are others that look like me? Why is the door closed on them? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll take the news with Zai Chadwood, Salam Media News. What you need to know, and how you need to know it after the break.